My name is Margaret Bennett. I'm 58 years old, a widow, and I've spent most of my adult life making sure everyone around me was okay, even if it meant I wasn't. I live in a modest, cedar-sided home in a quiet suburb outside of Boise, Idaho. It has a small porch that I used to decorate for every season, even long after the kids moved out. These days, the wreaths stay boxed in the attic. I work as an office manager at a mid-size real estate firm downtown. Nothing glamorous, just order structure and a good view of the river from the conference room. I've been there for 17 years. People call me dependable. I don't know if that's praise or just a label for people who never quit. I have two children, Madison 31 and Tyler 28. Madison's always been the kind of girl who wants things just so ambitious, precise, polished. She moved to San Francisco after college and made a name for herself in digital marketing. Tyler still lives closer to home and works as a mechanical engineer. Quieter, more grounded. It happened on a Wednesday morning. I was sipping coffee in the kitchen when the email came through. No subject line. Just from Madison. I smiled when I saw it, expected a little update, maybe a list of things she wanted me to bring for the wedding in Napa. I'd already helped book the venue, wired $30,000 for deposits, and listened to her fuss over napkin colors and lighting schemes for 3 months straight. But the smile faded the moment I opened the message. It read, "Mom. After careful discussion, James and I, along with his parents, have finalized the guest list. We've decided to keep things extremely intimate, and we believe it would be best for you to watch the ceremony via live stream. His mother is very particular about numbers, and we're trying to respect that. Hope you understand. Here's the link, Google Meet. Should be just like being there. Just like being there." I stared at the screen for a long time. My hands didn't shake. I didn't cry. There was just a sudden quiet hollowness. A shift. Like the room was darkened a little, even though the sun was still shining outside. I typed 4 words. "Sure. Enjoy your big day." Then I closed my laptop. No protest, no guilt trip. Just a withdrawal. It wasn't just a wedding invitation she took back. It was the unspoken contract between mother and daughter, that bond we pretend is indestructible. And maybe, just maybe, I had spent too long pretending. I cleaned my coffee mug. I got dressed. I drove to work. But I wasn't the same woman who sat on that kitchen stool 20 minutes earlier. Something in me had gone quiet, and not in a weak way. In a done way. At work, my boss Susan divorced twice, and forever swearing off men brought me a chai latte. "Rough morning?" she asked, setting it gently by my keyboard. I smiled and told her I was fine. She didn't press. That small act, her noticing, almost broke me. Not because it was big, but because it reminded me I still mattered. Around lunchtime, my phone buzzed. "Madison again. Please call me. Mom, this isn't funny. Can we talk?" I didn't respond. Not yet. I wasn't ready to be the one who rushed to make things right. Again. I walked to the cafe near our building and sat outside under the awning. Spring was just starting to bloom in Idaho. Tiny buds peeking from the branches, air still sharp but not bitter. I sipped my latte and breathed. That's when it hit me. Maybe I didn't have to keep showing up for people who only wanted me on their terms. Maybe I didn't need to perform or explain or beg to be seen. Maybe I'd been doing all of that for so long, I forgot what it felt like to simply be. That evening after work, I didn't go home. I turned left at the intersection near the florist shop and drove straight to Boise Mutual Bank. Carlos, the branch manager, greeted me by name. "Mrs. Bennett," he smiled. "How can I help you today?" I sat down across from his desk. My voice was steady. "I need to cancel a transfer." He tilted his head. "Which one?" "The $50,000 wire for the vineyard in Napa." Carlos blinked. "Let me check." "You're lucky. It's scheduled for processing first thing tomorrow morning." He paused. "Are you sure?" "That's a large amount." I nodded. "I'm sure." He printed the form and I signed it. Just like that, it was done. $50,000 saved. Or depending on how you look at it, $50 worth of dignity reclaimed. When I got home, I had 10 missed calls, 8 from Madison, 1 from Tyler, 1 off a number I didn't recognize. I didn't answer. I just poured a glass of wine, an old bottle of Malbec I'd been saving for Thanksgiving, back when Madison said she'd come home but didn't, and I stepped out onto the porch. The sun had almost dipped behind the mountains. A dog barked 2 houses over. My neighbor waved as she pulled into her driveway. I sat there and thought of all the birthdays I planned alone, all the holidays I cooked for 2, all the weekends I spent in airports, helping my kids move, visit, cry, and recover. And now, a link. Just a link. I set the wine glass down beside me and pulled my sweater closer around my shoulders. I didn't cry. I didn't rant. But I did something I hadn't done in years. I let myself feel the loss, not of the wedding invite, but of the illusion that I was still needed, still valued, still seen. And quietly in the silence of my porch, I began to let go. The next morning, I woke to a gray sky and 14 missed calls, 12 from Madison, 2 from Tyler. I watched the phone buzz across my nightstand like it was some insect trying to sting its way into my peace. I didn't answer. Instead, I made oatmeal, turned on the radio, and sat in my kitchen like I had 100 mornings before. But this time, I wasn't preparing to serve someone else's needs. I wasn't mentally compiling a list of things Madison might ask for. I wasn't bracing myself. I was just sitting. But sitting doesn't mean forgetting, because the memories still came rushing wave after wave, some soft, some sharp. I remembered driving Madison to piano lessons in the dead of winter, the heater broken, both of us wrapped in scarves, my fingers numb on the steering wheel. She never even liked the piano, but I kept taking her because she wanted to keep up with her best friend. I remembered when she called me crying at 26, just days after her fiancé left her. I took unpaid time off, flew across the country to San Diego, cleaned her apartment, and held her while she sobbed into a pillow. I remembered canceling my anniversary trip with Peter, our first vacation since he passed, just so I could wire money for a security deposit on her apartment when she got a new job. All those moments, I never asked for anything in return. I thought that's what mothers were supposed to do, love without keeping score. And I never did until I realized she had. She'd kept score. She decided I didn't fit the image of her perfect, curated wedding. Or maybe she decided her in-laws' opinions mattered more than the woman who raised her. And still, part of me wanted to believe this was a mistake, a misunderstanding, something I could talk her through. But then I thought of that line in her email. Should be just like being there, the LOL of emotional abandonment. That wasn't a mistake. That was Madison, making it clear my value came second to appearances, to numbers, to what James's mother thought was intimate. The next day at work, I kept my head down. I filed expense reports. I called vendors. I scheduled a lunch meeting for Susan. But inside, I was somewhere else entirely. Around 10:30 a.m., Tyler called again. This time I picked up. "Mom," he said. His voice was tired. "You okay?" "I am," I said. He hesitated. "Madison's. Well, she's losing it. She told me you canceled the wire transfer." "That's true. Yes." A pause. "They were counting on that money." "I know." "You're not going to the wedding, Tyler," I said calmly. "She uninvited me." "Yeah, but..." "Maybe she didn't mean it like that." "She meant it exactly like that." Another pause. "Okay," he said, finally softer. She's not used to you drawing lines, Mom. Neither am I." There it was. The real truth. The part they'd never said out loud. I'd always been the one to bend, to give, to absorb every blow with a quiet smile. I'd trained them for that. And now I was undoing my work. That night, I received a knock on the door around 9:15. It was Tyler, still in his work clothes, tie undone, hair disheveled. He stepped inside like he'd done 100 times before, but the energy was different now, tense, wary. Madison's freaking out, he said, immediately pacing across the living room. She says you're being dramatic. That you're punishing her. I raised an eyebrow. For not inviting me to her wedding. She said she didn't want drama. She wanted a clean, simple ceremony. James's family is, well, very traditional. I sat on the arm of the couch and folded my arms. I gave her $30,000 already, Tyler. He stopped pacing. I was about to give her $50,000 more. Tell me, do you think James's mother would be okay with her not getting that money? He looked stunned. Wait. You were sending more, I nodded. Was. Not anymore. He blinked, mouth half open. They're counting on that, he muttered. I stood up. Then maybe they should have counted on treating me like a person instead of a wallet. Jesus, Mom, he sighed. You're overreacting. There it was. That word. Overreacting. The one people use when you finally stop swallowing your pain and say it out loud. I walked to the front door and opened it. Mom. Get out. What I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I love you, Tyler. But I'm not going to be shamed in my own home for drawing a line that should have never had to be drawn. He stood there stunned. You always make everything about you, he said, voice sharp. And you always assume I'll keep showing up no matter how you treat me. Silence. Then he stepped through the doorway and out into the night. I shut the door gently behind him, and I exhaled. Not with regret, but with release. In that moment, I didn't feel angry or sad or petty. I felt clear. I was done carrying the weight of other people's comfort while mine crumbled. The next morning, I woke to a flurry of texts from Madison. Why are you doing this? This is childish. We're going to lose the venue. James's parents are furious. And finally, at 3:17 a.m., I don't understand why you're doing this to me. Of course she didn't. Because when someone's used to you carrying everything, they call it betrayal when you finally set it down. I turned off my phone. And then I made myself a proper breakfast. Eggs, toast, and fresh coffee. I even played music, something soft and old and jazzy. And I smiled to myself, not because I had won anything, but because I had finally stopped losing myself. It was around 11:00 a.m. when the email arrived, this time with a subject line, "Please don't ruin my wedding." I stared at it for a long time before clicking. Madison had written a long message, almost frantic in its tone, the words tumbling over each other like she was trying to undo everything with sheer volume. Mom, I know you're upset about the live stream situation, but this is extreme. We lost the venue deposit, and if we don't pay the balance by the end of the day, the caterer will walk. James's parents are furious. They say this proves you can't be reasoned with. Please don't do this. We can talk about you attending the ceremony, but we need the funds first. It wasn't an apology. It was a transaction. There it was laid bare. I wasn't Madison's mother in that moment. I was her leverage. A line item on her budget. An invisible hand holding the purse strings she thought she could still pull. And now that the money was gone, I had value again. I didn't respond. I didn't even finish the email. I just archived it and turned back to the contractor files on my desk. Susan noticed my expression and leaned against the doorway. You good? I looked up. Actually, I think I'm better than I've been in years. She smiled, slow and knowing. Lunch. That new Italian place finally opened. Normally, I would have made an excuse. Too much work. Not hungry. Maybe next week. But something inside me said, go. So I nodded. Sure, let's go. Over linguine and eggplant parmesan, Susan talked about her grandson and how he'd just started walking. She showed me a blurry video of him toddling across the living room like a drunk penguin. I laughed. I laughed. Not that shallow chuckle people give to be polite. It bubbled up from somewhere deep and unfamiliar. Then she set down her fork, wiped her hands, and looked at me. Forgive me, Margaret, she said gently. But you seem lighter today. And without thinking, I told her. All of it. The email. The $80,000. The withdrawal. The confrontation with Tyler. Madison's spiral. She listened without interrupting, just nodding her eyes soft and present. When I finished, she said something I'll never forget. Sometimes the deepest kind of love is the one that finally says no more. She reached across the table and gave my hand a light squeeze. And just like that, I felt something settle in me, like my bones had finally come home. Back at work, I ignored the missed calls. I ignored the texts. I even ignored the notification that James's mother had called me. They were all desperate now. Funny how fast boundaries can make you relevant again. That evening, as I pulled into my driveway, the porch light clicked on like it always did. The trees swayed in the evening breeze. The world felt still again. And then I noticed someone sitting on my front steps. She stood up when I parked tall, slender, fidgeting with her sleeves. It took me a moment to recognize her. Sophie. She gave a shy smile. Hi, Mrs. Bennett. Sophie had been Madison's best friend since the 6th grade. She used to sleep over on weekends, always making pancakes in the morning with way too many chocolate chips. I hadn't seen her in almost 10 years. What are you doing here? I know it's unexpected, she said softly, but I needed to talk to you. I unlocked the door and stepped aside. You want some tea? She followed me into the kitchen like she was 14 again, looking at the same photos on the fridge that had been there for over a decade. I filled the kettle. She sat at the kitchen island quiet. She sent you, I finally asked. Sophie hesitated, then nodded. Not directly. She's a mess, Mrs. Bennett. They lost the venue. The florist dropped out. Her in-laws are threatening to cancel the wedding altogether. I didn't speak. I just placed 2 mugs on the counter. She's spiraling, Sophie continued. She knows she messed up. She just doesn't know how to fix it. I looked her in the eye. Is that why you're here? To fix it for her. No, she said quickly and honestly. I'm here to ask. Is there anything she can say or do that would change your mind? I paused. Would there be? Would an apology fix the way it felt to be excluded from your own daughter's life? To be reduced to a transaction? To be told you're not welcome unless your check clears? I looked at her young hopeful, still carrying the belief that words can fix everything. No, I said quietly. There isn't. Her shoulders slumped. Not even if she apologizes. I placed her tea in front of her. Words are easy, Sophie. Especially when people are desperate. But people who love you, they don't wait until you cut them off to notice you're bleeding. Sophie looked down into her mug. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She just nodded. I get it, she said. Even if she doesn't. She stood slowly, and before walking to the door, she turned back. I'm sorry, Mrs. Bennett. For what it's worth, I always thought you were a better mom than she deserved. Then she hugged me. Not like a messenger trying to soften a blow, but like a woman who understood something that Madison never had. I watched her leave her coat flapping behind her in the wind, and then I closed the door. Not just the door to my house, but the door to an entire version of myself. The version who begged to be seen. The version that said yes too much. The version that let her worth be measured in how quietly she endured. She was gone now, and I didn't miss her. The wedding never happened, at least not the one Madison had planned. According to Tyler, they scrambled for a replacement. Everything looked solid budget without the money. The florist backed out. The band canceled. The guest list shrank from 150 to just a few relatives, mostly James's son. They ended up I wasn't invited. This time I didn't expect to be. A heavy silent ache in my chest. I didn't see it hoping the buzz would I didn't stand by the mailbox like some forgotten mother, waiting for an invitation that wasn't coming. Instead, I spent that day in my quiet ceremony. I watered my garden. I read an entire book without checking my phone once. I walked down to the farmer's market and bought sunflowers, my favorite, not anyone else's. I made myself pasta from scratch for dinner, poured a glass of wine, and played Ella Fitzgerald on the record player Peter gave me our last Christmas together. And I was okay. Better than okay. I was whole. A few days later, Madison sent me one final email. It was long, cluttered with emotion, part apology, part justification. She wrote about the stress, the pressure from James's family, and how she'd felt torn between two worlds. She said she panicked. She said she didn't mean to hurt me, that she thought I'd understand. I read it once calmly. Then I archived it. I didn't reply, not out of spite, but because there was nothing left to say. I didn't need a redemption arc, and I didn't need to be convinced that I mattered. I had already learned the truth in the silence that followed. You don't have to answer every knock on the door just because you recognize the voice. And I wasn't that woman anymore, the one who kept herself on call in case someone else needed rescuing. In the weeks that followed, something surprising happened. I didn't feel bitter. I felt clean. I went to work and came home without feeling drained. I no longer hovered near my phone waiting for gratitude or guilt. I joined a pottery class on Wednesday nights, just because I'd always wanted to. I stopped deferring joy. I started buying fresh flowers, always sunflowers, and I put them where I could see them first thing in the morning. I had coffee on the porch without anyone needing anything from me. And gradually, I made a new rule. If my presence is conditional, then so is my effort. Tyler came by once. Quietly. No drama. He brought me cinnamon rolls, my favorite kind. The ones from the bakery near my old high school. He didn't mention the wedding. He didn't defend Madison. We sat in the kitchen, sipping coffee, eating warm rolls, and watching the light stream through the window. I think she still doesn't get it, he finally said. I nodded. I know. She's not the only one, though, he added. I let you carry too much. We both did. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever get from him, and it was enough. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. But something real passed between us. A quiet reckoning. An acknowledgement. Later that week, I donated the extra set of pearl earrings I'd bought for the wedding ones I thought Madison might borrow. I dropped off her old piano books at the local library, let go of the weight that came with every maybe someday, and I found joy in strange small things. The rhythm of kneading clay at the pottery wheel, the hum of jazz through my living room at sunset, the feel of sunlight on my face as I tended the flowers I finally had time for. I stopped burning myself to keep others warm. That realization didn't come like a flash of lightning. It came like a slow dawn. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. And in that quiet, the woman I had always been, the one underneath the mother, the widow, the giver, finally got a voice. She didn't speak loudly, but she didn't need to. She simply said, "I'm still here." It was a Thursday morning when the doorbell rang. I had just come in from the garden, hands still dusted with soil, when I heard it, a soft, hesitant chime, like whoever pressed it wasn't sure they should have. I opened the door slowly. It was Madison. She looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe just quieter. Her hair was tied back in a low ponytail. No makeup. A worn gray cardigan that didn't belong to her, a wedding photo, or the image of the daughter who used to borrow my heels and lipstick in high school. We stood there, mother and daughter, with the screen door between us. "Hi," she said softly. I nodded, said nothing. She glanced down at her shoes. "I didn't call. I didn't want to give you a chance to say no." I waited. She took a breath. "I know you don't owe me anything, and I know I broke something I can't fix." Her voice cracked then, just a little. "I thought if I could explain, maybe. I don't know, maybe it wouldn't hurt as much." Still, I didn't speak. I wasn't cold. I wasn't cruel. I just didn't interrupt the silence that she had once filled with distance. I told myself I was protecting the day. It was about keeping the peace. But the truth is, I didn't want to feel judged. "You always did everything right, Mom." And sometimes, that felt like a spotlight on everything I did wrong. She looked up. Her eyes were glassy, but her voice didn't shake. "But I still should have invited you. I should have been a daughter, not a project manager." That made me smile just faintly. She stepped back from the door. "I'm not here to ask for money or forgiveness. I wanted to say it out loud. You didn't deserve it." There it was. Not a perfect apology, but an honest one. I could have opened the door. I could have stepped forward, hugged her, let it all go in one cinematic embrace like a movie ending. But this wasn't a movie. This was a real complicated life. Mine. So, instead I said gently, "I hope you find your peace, Madison." "I do." Her face faltered, just a flicker of hope retreating. She nodded. "Okay." She turned to leave, and I watched her walk down the driveway back to her car. She didn't cry. She didn't run. She just left. And when she was gone, I closed the door. Behind it, the house felt full. Not of sadness of air, of space, of me. I walked to the kitchen and put on a fresh pot of tea. The kettle whistled softly. I poured it into my favorite mug, the one with the faded tulips and the chipped handle. I stood by the window and looked out at my sunflowers, tall and golden, and leaning toward the light. I didn't know what the future with Madison would look like. Maybe we'd talk again. Maybe not. But I knew one thing: the next version of my life wouldn't be built on guilt or obligation. It would be built on choice, on truth, on the quiet, steady strength of a woman who no longer needed to prove her worth. Somewhere between the silence and the soil, I had found my way back to myself. And that, more than any wedding invitation or apology, was the ending I didn't know I'd been waiting for. Margaret Bennett, a widowed mother who spent her life raising 2 children with love and sacrifice, receives a heartbreaking email from her daughter Madison. She's not invited to the wedding. No explanation, no phone call, just rejection. Margaret, who had supported Madison emotionally and financially, including covering a $50,000 wedding fund, is stunned. Rather than react in anger, she quietly cancels the bank transfer and begins to reflect on a lifetime of being taken for granted. Her son Tyler visits confused but sympathetic, while Madison remains silent. For the first time in decades, Margaret sets a firm boundary, not out of spite but self-respect. The wedding falls apart. Without the funds, Madison scrambles, and the lavish event is replaced by a rushed backyard ceremony. Margaret isn't invited, and this time she doesn't wait for an apology. She embraces peace in her solitude, finding comfort in gardening jazz records and rediscovering herself beyond the role of mother. Weeks later, Madison appears at Margaret's door. Tearful and remorseful, she offers a halting apology, not to win anything back, but simply to acknowledge the hurt she caused. Margaret listens, but doesn't rush to forgive. She wishes her daughter peace and closes the door. In the silence that follows, Margaret feels lighter, whole. She's no longer the woman who bends herself into pieces to stay needed. She chooses herself not in bitterness, but in clarity. This is a story about betrayal and boundaries, sacrifice and self-respect. It's about what happens when a mother stops giving without receiving, and when a woman reclaims her identity not through conflict, but quiet strength. In the end, Margaret doesn't need to be invited to belong. She already belongs to herself. Margaret Bennett, a widowed mother who devoted her life to raising 2 children, is blindsided when her daughter Madison sends an email disinviting her from the wedding without explanation. Margaret, who had financially supported the wedding with a $50,000 contribution, quietly cancels the transfer and begins to reevaluate her place in her children's lives. Instead of exploding with anger, Margaret turns inward. She reflects on the decades of sacrifice, overlooked love, and emotional labor that defined her motherhood. Her son Tyler visits confused by the sudden tension, but offers the first hint of understanding. Madison, however, remains silent. The grand wedding Margaret helped fund collapses under its weight. Vendors cancel, guests back out, and the celebration shrinks into a backyard affair. Margaret isn't invited, And for the first time, she doesn't feel the need to chase an apology or wait by the phone. Instead, she begins choosing herself gardening, joining a pottery class, listening to jazz, and rediscovering joy without obligation. Weeks later, Madison shows up unannounced. Her apology is halting and incomplete, not asking for forgiveness, but acknowledging that she was wrong. Margaret listens with grace, then gently chooses peace over reconciliation. She closes the door, not out of resentment, but out of resolution. In that silence, Margaret finds clarity. She's not just a mother or a widow. She's a whole person no longer defined by being needed, but by being free. This is a story about boundaries, betrayal, and rediscovery. A woman who gave everything finally claims something for herself, the right to say, enough. And in doing so, she doesn't lose her family, she regains her voice. Margaret no longer waits to be invited. She's already home in her own life,